It's clear by this point. Brian Gutekunst has a type. He likes his extreme athletes, those high RAS scores. But the highest RAS living in Green Bay right now might not belong to a Packer. It might belong to a Packer's wife. Brian, this is getting weird. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Lombardi Time Brews. I'm your host, John Del Rey. Today, we're going to cover the news of the day. Yes, the Green Bay Packers made a signing today. They signed safety Jonathan Owens, formerly of the Houston Texans. And as I alluded to in my intro, perhaps one of the things that he's most famous for is being married to Simone Biles. So do with that what you will. But we are going to talk about Owens just a little bit and how he fits into Green Bay. And then, of course, as I've been building up to for a while, we're going to go into the 53-man roster prediction. I know it's way too freaking early for this. I know. I get it. A lot of this isn't going to be determined until like the first week of September. But draft is done. We've looked at their UDFAs. We now have a complete understanding as to the entirety of this 90-man roster. So at least at this point, let's take a look at where some guys fit and like how the Packers are going to complete this puzzle, because in some ways this puzzle's already done, like a good 75-80%. But the way that they determine the last 10-20% of this roster is going to be fascinating this year. And today's signing kind of just complicates it a little bit more. So, let's talk Jonathan Owens, starting free safety from the Houston Texans. Now, he's 27 years old. Originally, he was an undrafted free agent a few years back for Houston, and he's kind of gone up and down in their system, right? Until eventually earning more playing time in 2021 and then 2022, ascending all the way to being their starting free safety. And I'm going to be honest, the immediate comp for this signing is a signing that the Packers did earlier in the offseason of Tarvarius Moore. I'm not talking play styles, I'm not talking stats, but I'm just saying like similar position. Both are believed to be signed to one-year contracts. Both are going to be on the cheaper side of the free agent spectrum. And I got to tell you, I'm more excited about Owens. And the more I've learned, the more excited I've got, actually. Is his coverage skills perfect? No, but he did have 125 tackles from that free safety position last year. According to PFF, he had an 8.6% missed tackle rate, and he was the 15th best tackling safety in all of football last year per PFF. Back to his college testing days, he did have a RAS in the mid-9s, including a 4.37 40. So, ultimately, where does he fit? Well, I've been talking a lot on the channel about how Darnell Savage, they've mentioned how he's going to be returning to the robber role. More of a strong safety, more box safety, if you will. And that means that the Packers need more of a center fielder, true free safety type. That is where Jonathan Owens can come into play. Last year, he played 576 of his snaps at the true free safety position, 215 at the box, and 115 in the slot. So, what are you getting here? You're getting a 27-year-old, hyper-athletic safety with 1 year starting experience, who is one of the best tackling safeties in football last year, who also has a world of special teams experience, especially earlier in his career, who now is being added to that safety room to compete for, you gotta believe, a starting job, or if not, potentially being safety 3. Now, from everything that I've read thus far, it looks to be a 1-year contract. I don't know financials yet, but we'll see. I got to believe this is one of those typical like May signings that isn't exactly going to cost the Packers a ton of money. So very, very interesting, potentially high upside signing for the Packers if this guy can put it together, kind of like a Rasul Douglas, Devondre Campbell. Obviously, not every guy is going to be one of those, right? Like, we get that. Not every street free agent the Packers go pick up is going to blossom into this Pro Bowl or All-Pro. But with Owens, traits are there. So, maybe. Now, what does this mean for a leader in the locker room, strong safety Adrian Amos? Gotta believe this closes the door. On Twitter, Adrian Amos changed his bio from saying GB safety to NFL safety. That's a fairly strong indicator We know that there were, Brian Gutekunst had talked about wanting to potentially bring Amos back. He's not going to close the door on it, but we do know that Amos had taken that visit in Baltimore. There was believed to be some financial considerations between the two parties that was making a reconciliation difficult. Gotta believe adding another safety with starting experience, that door is going to be shut. And frankly, if they're really dead set on moving Savage to the robber role, then it kind of makes a lot of sense to not have Amos back, because Amos has played more so in the box the last couple of years. What they really needed, as I've mentioned before, is someone to be more a center fielder type. Kind of like Owens, if he can hold up. So Amos certainly will be a loss in the leadership category of things, but we know the Packers are trying to get younger roster wide, and this is just another move in that direction. So let's talk over that roster, right? The 2023 Green Bay Packers. This is a roster full, just littered with question marks. Up and down, right? Starting at quarterback, spanning all the way to kicker. Like, even your specialists have some questions this year. And you got a new long snapper. Like, everything's different for this team. Yet there's still a significant amount of star power. And I've been considering this kind of a top-heavy roster. You've got heavy star power, and then a whole lot of maybe what we'd call replacement-level players, or players out to prove themselves, or players on one-year contracts like Owens and Moore. And there's just a lot going on here, and this is a lot of questions. So I decided to look back at the 2022 roster for some guidance. And on the 2022 initial roster, these are the following numbers that they had at each position. Quarterback 2, running back 2, wide receiver 7. Yeah, remember when they did that? Tight end 4, offensive line 10, defensive line 6, inside linebacker 4, outside linebacker 5, cornerback 5, safety 5, specialists 3. And I kind of use that as a little bit of a guide. They didn't veer off too wildly last year from how they generally kind of do it. There were some wrinkles, sure, going with 2 running backs is a little bit of an anomaly, at least in Matt LaFleur's time. But some of the wrinkles I can see them replicating this year. So let's get started. The quarterback position, oh yeah, you know him, quarterback 1 now, Jordan Love. Quarterback 2, there's a legit talk here. Is it going to be 5th-round pick Sean Clifford from Penn State, or is it going to be Danny Etling, who spent all of last year in the Packers system? Or is it going to be neither? Because Brian Gutekunst left the door open that we're going to get to training camp. Neither one of these guys are going to do well, and he's going to go pick up a vet. Especially with someone like Matt Ryan still chilling. Nick Foles out there in free agency now. Like, if you want an older guy who is there for the leadership aspect, they are out there in free agency. Nonetheless, I've been talking about how they spent a draft pick on Sean Clifford for a reason. And maybe not every single reason is about how well he throws the football or every single decision he makes. They must believe that they can teach that stuff. What they don't believe that they can teach would be the leadership aspects, the mobility, the other things that Clifford historically has brought to the table wherever he's been. So Jordan Love, Sean Clifford, quarterback, 2, done. Running backs. Now this is the first real question. Do they keep 2 like last year? Or do they go back to their traditional 3, especially knowing that Matt LaFleur likes to keep 3 running backs on the roster? Well, you got Aaron Jones, you got A.J. Dillon. Locks, done. But then you also have guys like Lou Nichols, who they just spent a draft pick on. Patrick Taylor, who always seems to be running back 3, or Tyler Goodson. My official prediction is they stick with just 2. And maybe it's a little bit of just roster posturing. But for the initial roster, I think it's going to be just those 2. Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon. And why? Because they have options for running back 3. They have all 3 of those guys that they know aren't necessarily going to be coveted league-wide. Look at last year. It's probably going to take one of these guys to ball out in training camp and preseason to garner a lot of attention league-wide. That the Packers are going to feel as though they have to keep a 3rd one, or else they're going to lose them. The Packers have options at this position for how they utilize their 3rd running back. So I'm going to stick with 2 because it gives them a lot more flexibility at other spots that we're going to talk about later. Now let's look at the wide receiver position. Oh, you got your alpha, right? You got your X. You got your number 1. That's Christian Watson. You got Romeo Doubs. You got your 2nd-round pick, Jaden Reed. You've got Samori Toure, who I've talked at length about not being nearly as high on as a lot of people, but yet Matt LaFleur and Brian Gutekunst just can't really shut up about him. Because every single press conference, they seem to mention Samori Toure as a guy to watch. So You got to think he's a roster lock at this point, right? Then you got Dontavian Wicks, their draft pick. But where it really starts to get sketchy is wide receiver 6. Do they keep 6? Who's it going to be? Do they keep 7 again like last year? That would be surprising, given who they all are. But at least as of right now, and I reserve the right to be completely wrong about this in May. So for wide receiver 6, I got to go Bo Melton. Now I know the Grant Dubose fans are already angry at me, and I get it. Or, the undrafted free agent supporters, which there certainly are some as well. I get it. But realistically, historically, how is that wide receiver spot 6, used? Special teams. And Bo Melton, given his physical characteristics, could be a menace on special teams. And they were interested in him in the draft process last year. They missed out on him, so they just went and got him at midseason when he didn't stick on other NFL rosters. Packers see something there. Now, if we get into training camp and Grant Dubose looks like a complete package, more of a complete receiver than anyone thought, kind of like Romeo Doubs did last year, okay, then sure. But I think you've got 5 roster locks here in Watson, Doubs, Reed, Toure, and Wicks. And then spot 6 is... Because even if they cut Dubose, is he likely to get claimed for an active roster elsewhere? Or are they going to be able to sneak him through on a practice squad? That will probably depend on how well he plays in the preseason. As of right now, I got to think that nod would go to a special teams player in the form of Bo Melton. Looking at the tight end position, I think this is one of the easier ones to call. You got Josiah DeGuara, Luke Musgrave, Tucker Kraft, and then, of course, you got Tyler Davis. Now, Tyler Davis was retained this year on a 1-year contract. It could be Austin Allen, their practice squad tight end, who has the makings of a quality tight end. But again, kind of like Bo Melton at wide receiver 6, tight end 4 is more of a special teams position than anything. Rich Bisaccia, almost every single year in the NFL that the man has been a special teams coordinator, which is dating back a while, almost always has a tight end in the top 3 of special team snaps. And that was Tyler Davis last year. And they retained Tyler Davis for a reason. And I gotta believe that reason was to stick as that special teams tight end, because Bisaccia must like him in that role. So that means that he gets to roster spot. The offensive line, now you're starting to make some really, really difficult choices. Your starting offensive line, I would propose, is going to be David Bakhtiari, Elton Jenkins, Josh Myers, John Runyon Jr., and Yosh Nijman. Could be Zach Tom, absolutely. But I got Yosh Nijman at right tackle for one reason. Because I think they want Tom to start learning more on the interior. Like Matt LaFleur has spoken about before, that Tom may find his best position to be in the interior. He also has talked about putting the priority on the best 5. He reiterated that again when he spoke not too long ago in a press conference, that they now have plenty of time all offseason to run this through different guys, different scenarios. They're so ultra versatile on the line. They just want to find the best 5. Well, and Zach Tom may be a part of that best 5. Or he's just your 6th offensive lineman who can go at any one of the 5 spots. So either way, Yosh, Tom, either way, if someone gets hurt, Tom is probably the first one to shift around. And then Yosh goes in the right tackle, assuming Tom is starter. Hey, you get it. And the second tier, I have them keeping 10 offensive linemen total. So that means I'm keeping Rasheed Walker, who they seemed to really like last year and who did come on strong towards the end of the year. Sean Ryan, because I don't think they're ready to give up on their 3rd-round pick, even though he had about as disastrous of a rookie year as humanly possible. I don't think the Packers are ready to give up on him. Center 2, you could classify as Zach Tom. Certainly, got to find a spot for him. Let's put him there. Right guard 2, Royce Newman, because they seem to just continue to stick with Newman. And then right tackle, I'm actually going to go with Luke Tenuta. Now, that leaves off some guys, doesn't it? Yeah, Jake Hansen. The long Green Bay nightmare that has been Jake Hansen's run blocking at guard may be coming to an end. And I know, he probably was kept on the roster this year because he really was backup center. But when they tried him at right guard, it was a disaster, an unmitigated disaster. And so are you going to keep him around just to be center too, and you're probably going to teach Zach Tom that position anyway? Or let's go Caleb Jones. Now, I chose to keep Luke Tenuta over Caleb Jones for a couple reasons. Last year, when they had to activate an offensive lineman, who was it? It was Tenuta, it wasn't Jones. And I have a feeling that they view Tenuta as more of a finished product than that of a Caleb Jones. If they could stash Caleb Jones on the practice squad for another year, they would probably jump at the opportunity. That also does leave off a couple undrafted free agents, like Chuck Filiago, who I talked about the other day, and amongst a couple others. But this is where the cuts really start to be, okay, we got like 7 backup offensive linemen, and we like all of them. They all have high ceilings, they all do different things well. But you're not rolling into a season keeping 12 or 13 offensive linemen. So you got to make the choices, and finished products, versatility, who you can keep on the roster probably reigns supreme. Rasheed Walker, Sean Ryan, Zach Tom, Royce Newman, Luke Tenuta. Now, if Caleb Jones gets swapped in there, I won't exactly be shocked. If they decide to keep Jake Hansen again, since they gave him an RFA tender this year, yeah, I'm not even saying I'll understand, but it's possible. I'll acknowledge that. Let's look at the defensive side of the ball. So on the D-line, we got 5 players being kept in my mind. Kenny Clark, Devontae Wyatt, TJ Slayton. Those are obviously your starters. And then you got Kobe Wooden and Carl Brooks, your 2 rookie draft picks. Now, who does that really lead off? Jonathan Ford, last year's 7th round pick, who they kept on the active roster all year last year. Here's the thing with Ford. He's a big body. He's a nose tackle. You probably want him in your goal line D. But in order to keep some of the secondary players that I'm going to call off soon, you got to trim somewhere, because it's not like you're keeping 30 defensive players on a roster of 53. And Ford doesn't exactly have the most special teams ability in the world. You got to believe the ceilings are quite a bit higher in the form of Kobe Wooden and Carl Brooks than they would be in that of a Jonathan Ford. Plus, you've got some versatility, especially picking up Luke Van Ness, with some of these edge rushers who are able to play inside physically on the line, thus again lessening your need to keep 6 offensive linemen. The only question that I have with these 5, though, is where's the bulk? Right? Like, where's your Gilbert Brown? Where's your big dude? The one you could just put out there to absorb all these blocks. And yeah, that's TJ Slayton, but TJ Slayton isn't playing 80% of snaps. Not you need him to, I'm being facetious. But realistically, I think you're looking at 5 defensive linemen with a valid question as to who's the big guy, because you want Clark on the end. Joe Barry's talked about that. He wants Clark on the end more. But with only TJ Slayton as your only capable nose tackle, I don't know if you're going to be able to that much. Edge, I've got them keeping 5. Now, early reports of Rashawn Gary is that he's probably going to be ready for training camp, so let's give him a roster spot. Rashawn Gary, Preston Smith, Lucas Van Ness, Kingsley Enagbare, and then you get to outside linebacker 5, and I got to go with the free agent that they re-signed this year, Justin Hollins. Now, who's the loss there? That means they're getting rid of Jonathan Garvin. That means that they're getting rid of Brenton Cox Jr., the UDFA. And Brenton Cox Jr., I think, is a wonderfully developmental prospect. But, like I said just the other day, what is it that he needs to work on? Technique. The guy's got to learn how to play the position. He's got all the freak athletic traits, but he doesn't know what he's doing yet. He needs to diversify his repertoire. He could be a pass-rushing menace, but he's not complete yet. Yeah. Kind of a common refrain, right? So maybe they try to get Cox back on the practice squad, and they favor bringing in a guy that they specifically re-signed, a guy they picked up mid-year last year, and they retain Hollins. I think you've got 4 roster locks here in Gary, Smith, Van Ness, and Enagbare, and then a 5th. They're likely to keep 5 edge. They did last year. You know it's coming again this year. Is it going to be Hollins? Is it going to be one of these other prospects? I got to go with Hollins. Inside linebacker, keep in mind, as I call this off, that Tariq Carpenter is supposedly switching from safety to inside linebacker. He said so himself in the Packers draft party. So you got Devondre Campbell, you got Quay Walker. Locks, done. Eric Wilson was another free agent that the Packers re-signed on a 1-year contract. And he was amongst the team leaders in special teams tackles last year. But not only that, but he has quite a bit of starting experience at inside linebacker, formerly for the Minnesota Vikings in a past life. And then you got Isaiah McDuffie, who by all accounts the Packers really like and saw the field a bit last year. So let's go this way. Campbell, Walker, Locks, Wilson, McDuffie, and Tariq Carpenter. Yeah, keep 5 inside linebackers? Yeah, I think they really might this year. I really do. Because Tariq Carpenter did such a good job as a flyer on teams. I don't think they're going to want to give up on that project very easily. You got Duffy, you got Wilson. I could see it. Now, cornerback. This is one position where I have them going a little bit lighter than you may expect. You've got Jair, you got Rasul, you got Keyshawn Nixon, locks. You got Carrington Valentine, draft pick this year. He's a roster lock, right? That already gives you 4. So other candidates left are going to be like Corey Ballantyne, who they re-signed, Shamar Jean-Charles. And that does nothing to speak of Eric Stokes, who, given the fact that we don't know anything about his injury really at all, but Matt LaFleur did say at the owners' meetings that it was probably going to be some time yet for Stokes. I got to believe Stokes is on track, at least as of right now, to start the season on the PUP, the physically unable to perform list, meaning that he's out for the first chunk of the season, and the Packers don't have to carry a roster spot for him, meaning they can give it away to some other cornerback and help solve this roster puzzle, at least temporarily. So at corner, Jair Alexander, Rasul Douglas, Keyshawn Nixon, Carrington Valentine, and Corey Ballantyne. Re-signed this year on a 1-year contract, one of the more utilized special teamers, especially towards the end of the season. I think Shamar Jean-Charles' time is coming to a close in Green Bay. And part of the reason, too, that you're going to go a little lighter on corner is that you can keep more safeties and continue to figure out whatever that roster spot looks like. So let's take a look at safety. Well, you got Darnell Savage. Unequivocally going to be a starter, no doubt about it. Your other likely starter at this time, probably Rudy Ford. He re-signed on a 1-year, $2.5 million contract. So you got Savage, you got Ford, then you got your 7th-round draft pick, Anthony Johnson Jr., one of my favorites. Then you've got new free agent signee, Jonathan Owens. You've got other free agent signee, Tarvarius Moore. And you've got Dallin Levitt, who you re-signed on a 1-year contract, who's one of the leaders in the locker room, one of your special teams captains, one of Bisaccia's favorites. I think you keep all 6. I really do. Because they had the opportunity to sign Owens when they signed Moore, didn't they? Unless I missed something in the chronology of all of this. So, they must like them both. So, Savage and Ford as your starters, Anthony Johnson Jr., who's creeping up there, Owens and Moore as your free agents, and then Dallin Levitt is basically a special teamer only because you don't want him playing safety. He's one of your special teams captains, and I don't think they're going to walk away from that very quickly. So keep 5 corners in order to keep 6 safeties, and then figure out the rest when Stokes is ready to return? I think it's entirely possible. And then, of course, you got your 3 specialists. Anders Carlson, maybe Mason comes back. It's possible. But again, if you're looking for a reason as to why the Packers chose Anders Carlson, go back, look at his stats from 2020. Go look at the 2020 version of Carlson, not his injury-riddled 2021, 2022s. I'm just trying to offer a rationale as to why they might have chosen him. So Carlson at kicker, Pat O'Donnell at punter, and then long snapper Matt Orzech. I was approached with a question the other day in the comments about should the Packers look at the punt god now that seems to be that his charges have cleared up, that might have been a false accusation, etc. I'd be very hard-pressed to believe that the Packers still are going to look that way, partially because they just seem to really like Pat O'Donnell. Pat O'Donnell's the oldest guy on the roster. But beyond that, he's also one of the better holders in the NFL, and it's part of the reason the Packers signed him at all. So I'm inclined to believe Pat O'Donnell's sticking around. So there you have it. 2 quarterbacks, 2 running backs, 6 wide receivers, 4 tight ends, 10 offensive linemen, 5 defensive linemen, 5 edge, 5 inside linebacker, 5 corners, 6 safeties, and 3 specialists. And there you go. Packers. 53-man roster. I reserve the right to be horrendously wrong about this, but as of right now, that's the way that I see the Packers roster. Thanks so much for joining me here today. I hope you have a fantastic weekend. Looking ahead to next week, just a super quick logistical note. There is going to be no episode on Monday. Yeah, I got like a doctor procedure thing. I'm going to be gone most of the day. So I'm out Monday. No episode. Nothing coming. No Lombardi Time Brews Monday. But on Wednesday of next week, you can expect an episode. And then Friday, it's looking like I'm going to do something. But maybe not on YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, wherever you're used to hearing me. Maybe in a different place. Still waiting on some contracts to finish up. But when they get there, I'll be announcing. Maybe you could come join me next Friday night. So, have a wonderful weekend. Thanks so much for joining me here. And as always, go Pack Go.